We appreciate that.
Let's go. Today's Praying Alive class, Standing Before God, is dedicated by Silvana Mander in memory of her beloved and adored mother, Fortuné Mazal Bat Henriette, Alea Shalom, and an appreciation of Rabbi Fari for his guidance, his amazing sense of humor, and enormous spiritual contribution to our lives. I mean, that's it. No more. That was making me feel great. I appreciate it. Thank you. As well, Praying Alive class today is dedicated by Marilyn Plitman in loving memory Luna Shmat, her mother Sarah Nina Bat Julie, AH, for Askara. We were running a BOGO. You buy one class, get one free. Okay. That's not how it works, but I have it here, and why not, right? It doesn't cost extra to read it. Also, should be refuah shelema, Be'ezrat Hashem. Should be refuah shelema for Pinchas Rafael Ben Sarah Natasha, the young boy that's still in critical condition, whose sisters were passed away. Well, they did not pass away. Whose sisters were killed, and whose mother was killed in this terrible car crash. Okay, let's begin. So, a lot to cover. I'm going to try and speak quickly. Is that all right? Okay, let's go. Somech nofelim v'rofe cholim umatir asurim umekayem emunato mishenei afar. So let's translate literally. Hashem, you are so mighty. God, you are so powerful that somech nofelim, you support the falling. Rofe cholim, you heal the sick. Matir asurim, and you free the captured. Umekayem emunato, and you fulfill and you keep your trustworthiness. Emunato lishenei afar, to those that sleep in the dust. Quite poetic, isn't it? Those that sleep in the dust. Okay. So what is the tefillah trying to communicate to us? There's obviously more here than meets the eyes. What are we referring to? What are we expressing? And perhaps most pertinent, what are we supposed to be thinking when we're saying these words in the Amidah? So, the first thing I think is important to notice is that there's one thing here which is different than the others. Rofe cholim refers to someone who is already sick. God, this person who is unwell, Rofe cholim, you heal those that are already sick. Matir asurim, you free or you untie or unbind those that are captured, that are prisoners. Nofelim is people that are still falling. Right? It's not somech elu shenaflu, those that fell, but rather somech nofelim, those that are almost like in free fall. They're still falling. They're constantly in a state of falling. So we have to understand, why is the pasuk communicating somech nofelim in a way which is different than rofe cholim matir asurim? Second thing that we should notice is somech does not mean he stood up. Somech means he supports those that fall. So somech nofelim is also different, not only in terms of the problem being solved, but also in the mechanism and in the method that God is using to be able to solve the problem. Once you've healed the sick, they're no longer sick. Once you've supported those that fall, they're not standing, they're just supported. So what we really need to think about is, when we talk about the Torah in tefillah, when we talk about things in tefillah, we're not trying to cover all the bases and tick all the boxes so that somebody should be able to relate to some part of the Amidah. Like, let me talk about a guy who's too tall and a guy who's too short. Let me talk about a person who's too fat and a person who's too skinny. And everyone will find one thing that they relate to, but the other things are not relevant to them. Actually, what we're supposed to be understanding in tefillah is that every single person is supposed to relate to every single word. So on some level, what we're saying is that every one of us is a person in free fall. And every one of us is a person who is unwell. And every one of us is a person who is trapped, who is a prisoner, who is a hostage. So we need to try and understand and figure out how to dress that in clothing, like we spoke about last week, that helps us understand what it means on a personal level. So in what way do people fall? I remember there was a commercial back in the 90s. Help! I've fallen and I can't get up. Remember that one? Hear that? For only $13 a month. You know, you would have peace of mind knowing that your loved ones could press the red alert and someone would call. Remember that? I've fallen and I can't get up. So, obviously that's not all it means. How do people fall? But more importantly, not just how do they fall, but how do they fall in a way where they don't hit the floor, they keep falling? What would you assume that means? Especially using maybe a more modern lens to understand what that looks like and how we relate to it. So I want to just describe a few things, because I believe, and really what we're looking at over here is not only a element of falling, of sickness, and of hostages, but rather something which is a chain reaction. So let's try and take a look at this on a couple different levels. In order to do that, I'm going to use a very timely example. We have a very famous teaching when it comes to the laws of Pesach, that there are three different kinds of chametz. One kind of chametz is called ta'arovet chametz, which means a mixture of chametz. What is an example of a mixture of chametz? Beer is a mixture of chametz. It's made from hops, which is a grain. Then you're then adding, a liquid to it. So it's got part chametz, part something else. Chicken soup with noodles or matzah balls, depending on which country you're from. All right? That is a chametz mixture. One kind of chametz is a chametz mixture. Not something which is totally chametz, like bread, but something which is a mixture. So ta'arovet chametz is one. The second element is actual chametz. Bread, pretzels, cookies. The third level is something which is called chametz noksha, which means chametz which has become kasheh. It's become hardened. It's no longer something which is edible. It's like rock solid. Kind of like my pizza, but like in a week. If we left it here through Passover. Okay? Now, we have a famous teaching that says that chametz is a element of something which is leavened or bread or something which is risen. But it also refers allegorically to the yetzer hara that is within a human being. In fact, the language of the Talmud is Ritzonenu, our will is to do your will, God. So why, if we all want to be good people, I think everyone wants to be a good person, why aren't we always good people? Says the Talmud, we want to do what you want us to do, Hashem. But we have a problem. Seor sheba'isa, the yeast in the dough. The yeast in the dough, you just leave it there, what happens? By itself. The dough starts to rise and rise and rise, creates these chemical reactions, brings in literally hot air bubbles into the dough, causing it to rise. So ladies, chametz in its general term relates to the process of the yetzer hara causing a reaction within us where we are simply subject to what is happening, and we, if we don't fight back, fall in his hands. So these three elements of chametz represent three stages in the process of falling victim to the Yetzer Hara. The first one is ta'arovet chametz, a mixture of chametz. And this is, here we're talking about this in prayer just to give us a mashal, a way of thinking about it. Ta'arovet chametz is something which is only partially bad. What would be an example of that? A person who's doing a good thing but for a terrible reason. Could you imagine that? Terrible reason. So as an example, I see someone's going out with someone on a date, I go up to them and I'm like, this is a terrible person, they're the worst person ever, and I get them to break up. Now, was there some truth in what I said? Yes. Why am I enjoying this so much? Because I hate this person. Good thing or bad thing? On the one hand, I told the person they're dating the truth about them. Hail the conquering hero, I'm a knight in shining armor. But you know what? Maybe I exaggerated it a little bit. Maybe I really enjoyed saying that Lashon Hara. That's a mixture of chametz, ta'arovet chametz. A lot of what we do wrong in this life is in this category. It's not totally evil. I mean, I kind of feel like no one goes up to an old woman walking across the street and just smashes her repeatedly over the head while grabbing her purse. I mean, some people do that, but not most normal people are not doing something which is objective. No one beats up babies. Like, you know what I mean? That's not where we sin. Where do we sin? On borderline things. Like, borderline. That's ta'arovet chametz. You know what happens when you're not careful with ta'arovet chametz lines in your life? You fall. And you don't stop falling. You then fall to the next level. A level where you've actually become sick. A level where it's full chametz. It's now completely wrong. So as an example, in the beginning, I decided to go, even though I was strict on kosher, but my husband is not so strict, and he really wanted to go out to this restaurant, so I just said, fine, I'll go, and I'll only have something. And then he said to me, well, don't only have a Coke. It's just awkward if you're only having a drink and everyone's here. Maybe you're like, okay, fine, I'm just gonna have, a piece of fish raw, just beaten over the head with a hammer. Like they didn't cook it, they didn't season it, it has to be kosher, but I'm in a non-kosher restaurant. And then the next time we go out, it's like, just add the rice, just add the nori, it's sushi, just add the thing, and next thing you know, it's tempura, and after that it's like, prawns, and after that it's, so it goes from something which is kind of, I was just doing it, I felt bad for my husband. My mom asked me to come out for her birthday, and she's not as strict as I am, I went into the elevator and the doorman pushed the button, but then I pushed the button with my elbow, and then I pushed the button with my finger. Right? You see how this works? That's how the Yetzer Hara gets us. So we start to fall on something which is like an admixture of good and bad. Somech nofelim. Then we go to a point where we see that what we're doing is wrong. But we're sick at this point. And we can't stop ourselves even though we know it's bad. And I talk about this all the time. For the longest time they would put on the cigarette packs, smoking kills. Red, big letters. And you would see the people open up the pack of cigarettes. Just take it out. And as they're taking it out, you just see the flash of red. Smoking kills. The guy's like, could you imagine a guy taking a knife and just going casually, just slowly, stabbing himself? I had the hardest day at work today. It's just he's just stabbing himself. There's no difference. But there comes a point where we get sick. And in our sickness, we can't deal, we can't operate, we're not operating from a healthy place anymore. That's the second level. And then there comes the third level, where the chametz is not actually even edible anymore. There's no reason for you to do this thing that's wrong. There's no reason for you to talk about, you don't like someone, you speak badly about them because someone else might be dating them and you, in your mind, think you're doing a good thing because you're stopping them. There comes a point where we're just talking. Ever hear people talking gossip about people they don't even know? None of us, there's no one here who's going to be affected. What is the take-home enjoyment of speaking random, gossip about this person that you have nothing to do with? That's when it's gone beyond a sickness. And it's already, you're just doing something that's nauseous with no benefit. That's chametz noksha. There's no enjoyment. So it goes first in life, it works this way. First we are somech noflim, we're falling. What happens if we don't stop ourselves? We get to a place where we're sick. Now listen carefully. We've said this idea many times. We never want God to intervene more than we need Him to intervene. Remember that? Melech Ozer Moshe Magen. Why? Because if when we're falling, God not only supports us, but stands us up back on our feet, then we don't learn ever how to get up ourselves. So yes, you could carry your child everywhere. You don't need to put them down on the ground and let them fall and let them learn to walk. But then otherwise, you're going to wind up carrying a 30-year-old man in your arms because they don't know how to walk. So even though God could carry you, He's not doing you any favors if He carries you. So while we're still falling, we haven't landed, what do we ask Hashem for? Somech nofanim. Just support us enough that we could stand up ourselves. Back us, help us. But not to the point where you're doing it for us. Then comes a point where we can no longer save ourselves. And now we're, so to speak, in the hospital. This idea is true on a spiritual decline. And we know and we feel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing this for us on a spiritual level. We're not in the best place, and all of a sudden someone sends us a clip from this rabbi and he's saying exactly what I needed to hear in this minute. You don't even know. Okay. Then there's the next level down where, no clips are helping. I need Hashem to take a much more present role. Rofe cholim, I need Him to fix this problem. I'm in a cynical state of mind. Hashem, I need you to help me fix it, turn it around. I'm sick. I have everything, and all I can focus on is what I don't have. And everyone tells me, look at, you're blessed like this, and you're blessed like that, and I know that they're right. And I even tell this to other people myself. But somehow, I don't know, I can't snap out of it. That's Rofe cholim. We ask Hashem to heal us. We've become sick. We can't help ourselves. And finally, the last level is Somech Rofe cholim matir asurim. We're not even sick anymore. We're in jail. It's not just that my body, so to speak, is not functioning properly. My soul, my emotions, my confidence. It's got to a place where the keys are no longer even in my hands. There's someone else who has the keys, and I can't let myself out. So my friends, when we think about the terminologies here, what are we imagining? We are imagining all forms of falling. On a mental level, on a mental health level, you can see this process and this progression happening as well. You see a person who's no longer, they don't have out of a job, and they're getting upset, and they're still going to job interviews, but like huffing and puffing. Somech nofalim. And they get to a point where no job is good enough, and they don't want to go anywhere, and they have to give and then they get to a point where they're just like, leave me alone. They don't walk out of the door. They don't walk out of the door of their room. from low mood, right, to some form of anxiety or upset, and to a full-blown clinical depression. This progression happens in spirituality. It happens on a mental health level. It happens on a physical health level. But it doesn't have to mean that a person is actually, taking pills or getting therapy. If a person has a relationship, and in their relationship, there was once a time when they were happy and things were working. And then comes a time where the person starts to lose hope that the relationship will change. So they're putting in effort, but not nearly as much or not nearly enough. That's a person who's falling. They're not divorced. They're not in a place of abuse. They're just falling. If you stop it there, the whole marriage could be turned around in a few days, in a few minutes. You change the person's perspective. You tell them how amazing their wife is, how amazing their husband is. You help explain what's going on in each other's life. Boom, turns back around. Somech nofelim. Then there comes a time when the marriage is sick and it needs a proper intervention. And then there comes a time when it's beyond sick. And the people are not even capable enough anymore of having the marriage become fixed from within itself. The body can't even heal itself anymore. It needs people. I get this sometimes. Rabbi, I need to say this to my wife, my daughter, my husband, my kids. Could you help me write the text? They can't, they need help even, never mind making a decision, even in communication. Help me write the text. You can't write it like that. It's unbelievable. So when we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we notice that God, in His greatness, is running the world. A lot of times we tend to think of things, but we don't think of ourselves. God is the king of the whole world, but is He the king of me? He's saving everybody. Yeah, but He's also saving me. Where was I 2 weeks ago when things were looking dark and I started kind of, and you could see it, even the happiest people. Sometimes they lose their spark. They lose their mojo. Get in fast enough, you turn it around, easy. Gets to a point where, they need help, and then they pull themselves out of it. Gets to a point where they themselves, without external intervention, will never become better again. That's the final stage of what we're asking, what we're noticing in the turning around from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is the practicality of it. Now, I want to share how does God save? What does it look like that God stands up a person who's falling? Because I want you to notice it in your own life. We mentioned all of a sudden something comes along and a rabbi clip was sent to your phone. It doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like that. You know what Somech Noflim could be? Do you guys remember walking out last week? And all of a sudden the sun was shining and it was 65 degrees outside in Manhattan. And everyone's walking around in short sleeves. Miserable winter, tariffs, everything's going on. And then all of a sudden New York City, with its rats and its mandated composting and its locked up deodorant, right? And the criminals running around the street free. All of a sudden, it's a beautiful day. And people walking in the street happy. And what did God do? Here comes the sun. Da, 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 da. That was it. That's all He did. He loaned us a day of summer in the middle of darkest winter. The streets of Manhattan, I don't know if you went out that day, packed. Everyone's running to the park. It was extraordinary. Sometimes, Somech Nofelim comes in the way of a sunny day in the middle of the winter. It happens when, again, nothing even spiritual. You're walking down the street and you see a child walking with their parents, and your heart is just like the sour, bitter, angry is just pierced by the tiniest little, that's so adorable. The other day I was telling my kids, I went to get glasses in New York, somewhere in Muncie. I walk in and there's this doll sitting there, on one of the chairs. Big blue eyes, like something out of Pixar, and blonde pigtails just sitting there on the chair. And then the doll started moving. It was like an actual child that was too porcelain perfect to be human, and then they were. And she was the cutest baby. You just watching this kid, you're like, wow, such a cute kid. That split second of joy that you see a child, a cute child just smiling in the middle of the day, or some kid sitting there at a restaurant in a window with tomato sauce all over their face, and just with their hands up living their best life, right? You don't know this child. They're not your kid. They have nothing to do with you. You're not bringing them home. They're not giving you the joy, you're not having the joy of raising that kid. But that split second, it heals. Art heals. Music heals. Sun heals. Beautiful human interaction, it heals. You see someone fall in the street and 10 people jump up and try and help up. And that split second, your view of the world heals. So God has many ways of supporting the fallen, of making sure that the free fall that they're in, it stops. And there's something holding them up. But I want to give you another example of what Somech Nofelim can mean. People, when they have a clarity in what they need to do, in what they're here for, it allows for a person to survive very difficult things. They say in the name of Nietzsche, he used to say that a person or a people that has a good enough why can survive anyhow. If you're running up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in the heat of the summer, you're schwitzing, you're exhausted, You know what's interesting? Put 2 baskets on either side, throw the kid a ball, and all of a sudden he's capable, the same kid that can't go to the car to get the groceries for you. All the way to the car. He's been running for 2 hours, back and forth, up and down the court. Why? Because for a basketball game, he has a very clear purpose. He knows why he's going, he knows why he's running back. There's a tremendous enjoyment for him in what he's doing. When we have clarity of purpose, oftentimes we're able to, without changing anything, to push through very difficult things. So part of Somech Nofelim, part of Rofe cholim, is when a person has clarity of purpose. Do you remember a time where you were going through something very difficult, but all of a sudden you understood the purpose or the meaning of that pain, or you understood why it was important for you to be able to withstand that pain? You fall off your bike, you injure yourself, but your kid is still walking or riding his little tricycle in the street. You jump up off the ground and you hobble over as quickly as you can. You're running right through the pain because you know what you need to do. Sometimes the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Somech Nofelim, sometimes the way He heals us is by granting us clarity and purpose, by granting us meaning in that difficulty. And sometimes what we need is not for Him to take away the problem. What we need is for Him to be able to allow us to get through that problem. And that's Rofe cholim, and that's Matir Asurim. But I believe as well that this concept of Matir Asurim is one which is probably the largest and the biggest receptacle that people fall into. Everybody is trapped, and everybody's falling, and everybody's sick. Think for 1 second, what is something that you are doing that it is within your power to stop doing? Something you're doing wrong. It doesn't have to be nasty or very wicked, but something you're doing that you could be doing better. Everyone got something? Yeah? You got something? Maybe you're lashon hara. Maybe you could be a little bit more strict with this, or you could start maybe praying more, or you could be on the phone with your mother-in-law or your mother, or you could put in a little bit more effort with the kids, or you know what, I've been a little bit distant and cold. I could be more I could be more forgiving to this person who upset me. Everybody's got something? Is it in your power? Could you change it if you wanted to? Yeah? That's your noflim. What do you feel, Rofe cholim, what do you feel that you've got that you could do if they made the first move? Like I could, but I have to feel that that's Rofe cholim. Matir asurim is when you're completely trapped. What is there about yourself, your persona, that you would be so happy to change, but you can't? That's where you're trapped. But people find God in prison. Literally in asurim, when they are locked up. People find God when they personally, in their own day-to-day life, are locked up. People find God in a hospital bed. When the doctor says there's nothing more we could do, what do we do now? Now it's time for prayer. That's matir asurim. That's beyond Rofe cholim anymore. So my question to all of us is, what can we feel and what can we bring on a personal level to these receptacles, to these boxes, where we can feel that God's strength and God's greatness would be able to lift us up, to upscale, to upgrade the lives that we're living? Isn't that a fascinating thing? I think to myself also, maybe you remember this when you were a kid and your parents were raising you however they were raising you, and you thought to yourself, when I get it to be a mother or father, I'm not gonna. You see a relationship, you're like, when I have a relationship. And then you're doing the same exact thing that your mother did. And someone says, you sound like your husband or your kid. You sound like your mother. And you're like, I do not sound like my mother. Actually, you sound exactly like your mother. There are modes and modalities that we get trapped in. And I think this is also true about our professional careers and our dreams. Like, where you are right now, is this what you imagined your life would become? No? Okay. Why isn't your life more like what you imagined it would become? Why isn't it? And I want you now to realize, after you answer that question, that the answer to that question is irrelevant. So most people are completely caught up in, why am I trapped? And what they really need to say is, what is the thing that trapped me? But why am I trapped is not the same as what is the thing that trapped me. You can leave. You can start something. You can build a business. You can become a writer. You can become an artist. It's never too late. And if you think it's too late, isn't ageism itself the trap that you're locked in? You see what the tefillah is asking of us? Can't do that. I'm a rabbi. So what? Is your definition of age or position or family responsibilities, is that locking you in to something that you don't want? I think most people feel that life is not what we want it to be. Life is just what you do with what you're dealt. I think there's some truth to that. But I think overall, it's a lie that mediocrity keeps telling us. And it says it to us enough that eventually we believe it. So all of a sudden, when you feel like, I could. I refer to this very often. And this is one of the other classes we talked about this also. You guys remember when Rosalie was here? She was actually sitting right over there. She was like 96 years old. And at the age of like 85, she decided she was a Holocaust survivor. I think her baby was murdered. It's just like horrible. And the lights went out on her life. And eventually she came here and got married, had a daughter, but the lights were off her whole life. She was a person who lived with so much sadness and bitterness and anger. And then one day she says to her daughter, she's 85 years old, she's like, I want to learn how to ballroom dance. And I want to go, dog sledding in Alaska. And I want to write my own book. And her daughter's like, okay. Watch the movie, by the way. Go online, you'll find it. Rosalie, I think it's called. Maybe Finding Rosalie. And overnight, she just decided, I'm going to do those things. So her daughter's like, great. And she got her someone. The guy started coming to the house and teaching her how to ballroom dance at 85 years old. And then she helped her write a book. And at 87, I think, she went to Alaska and went dog sledding. I think her daughter may have drawn the line at at skydiving. So when she was here, people asked, I don't remember if it was people or me, but someone asked, what happened on that morning? And she says, I don't know, it was just like someone turned the lights on. And I never wanted to go back into the dark. Somech nofelim, rofe cholim, umatir asurim. All of a sudden, the chains are broken. Where you feel capable, you feel like you can. Yes?
So, Somech Noflim is already people who are already down, or we pray for people to be up?
They're in the process of falling. That's why they're called nofelim. They're still falling. Somech means supports the falling. Okay? Now, what's interesting is that we've talked now about this idea of nofelim, of falling, in a personal sense, on many different levels. There's falling in health, there's sick in health, there's trapped in health. The person can't walk, they're tied to the bed, they're trapped. Right? I can't, what do you want? The guy's in a wheelchair. Yeah, but there's people in the wheelchair who are in the Special Olympics playing wheelchair basketball. Do you understand how the guy who's in the wheelchair has decided that he's trapped? Now, even if he can't get out of the wheelchair, it doesn't mean that he's not trapped. He could still find a way to make something with his prison. So that actually, ironically, this guy who's now in a wheelchair, now in the international Special Olympics, whatever it is, he's now traveling to more countries, seeing more people, accomplishing more with his life than he did when he had two working legs. And I ask you, which version of him was more trapped? This one or the one before? Where he sat in his cubicle, working 14 hours a day on a spreadsheet. The irony is that it might be that the gift of release was this sickness, which then caused him to say, what am I living for? Sometimes that sadness is a necessary ingredient in the soup to be able to ask yourself, well, I don't understand. The things that were barely making me get by are taken off the table. So you know what? I need to find a reason good enough to live. What is it? Okay. So there's personal falling. But we say in the Birkat Hamazon, Harachamanu yakim lanu, Hashem, please stand up, Sukkot David Hanofalet. Stand up the Sukkah, the tabernacle of David, Hanofalet. What does Hanofalet mean? That is falling. Right? Hanofalet means that not shenafal. Hanofalet means that is falling. Now, the rabbis explain that there's individual falling and then there's global falling. There's national falling. Collective. I think in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, we experienced a national falling. A sense of such despair. A sense that somebody is going to have to say something. I mean, someone's going to have to feel bad for us. This is obviously going to change everything. And then it doesn't. And then we fall deeper into that despair. And then ironically, it is in the recognition that no one's going to march for you, that you best be marching yourself, that the Jewish people internationally woke the heck up. So there's national falling. But I think what we're learning about over here, why is it called the Tabernacle of David? David was a person whose life could not have gone worse. Like everything that happened to this man was the worst possible version of life. He's rejected by his brothers and his own father. His brothers consider him an illegitimate son. His father doesn't consider him to be a person with potential. When the Navi comes and says, God told me that there's a king coming from this house, he shows all of his sons, this one, no, this one, no, this one, no, this one, no. He says, those are all my sons. The guy's like, no, I'm a prophet. I'm pretty sure God knows what he's talking about. You know, God told me that he's here. Don't you have any more? Finally, they're like, oh, you mean David? It didn't even enter his father's mind that he could have any potential for leadership, for greatness. He becomes a shepherd. Eventually, he goes to work for the king. He saves the entire Jewish people by killing Goliath to get the prize to marry King Saul's daughter. King Saul's like, wait, you won? No, sorry, you're not marrying her. Marries off the girl that he promised to the one that kills Goliath. He marries her off to somebody else. The guy just can't catch a break. Then King Saul thinks that he's trying to take his throne, which he's not. So Saul decides to chase after him to kill him. Until eventually, what happens is, he survives this attack from King Saul, has a family, and his own children are trying to kill him. One of his children is raped by another one of his children. This guy's life is the worst ever. An entire city of Kohanim are slaughtered because they try and give him safe passage. Go live with that. And what does King David do? Va'ani tefilati. And I am prayer. Va'ani tefilati. He takes all of the difficulty, all of the sadness, all of the anguish, all of the pain, all of the problems, and he turns it into a song. A song to Hashem. So here we are in 2025 in Birkat Hamazon saying, Harachamanu yakim lanu, Hashem, please stand up for us. the tabernacle of David, the shelter of a person who had everything go wrong and still could sing. Help us sing again. That's what that Harachaman means. Isn't that a wild idea? We got a global falling, not just national. Our world is sick. We're so obsessed with ourselves. We're a narcissistic society. We're a cynical society. We're a spoiled society. This is what's going on today in the world. So what do we do when the whole world is falling? We recognize that there's only one being in the world that can stand up an entire world, the one that made that world in the first place. Somech nofelim. Now I know it sounds impossible, but I want you to just consider one thing. Remember after World War II, when they first started the corrupt organization that is now the UN? Back then, the UN was a noble thing. It was an institution begun by all the nations to try and ensure that nations wouldn't do this to other nations. That was its purpose. At that time, the UN recognized the right that Jews had to Eretz Israel, to Israel. They recognized the pain of a refugee people that was being systematically wiped out for no reason whatsoever. There was humanity to the UN. Where that's gone is anyone's guess. But my friends, that was humanity rallying together after falling. And we can get there again. But unfortunately, our biggest challenge as a society and families and communities is that we look at a problem directly in the face. And instead of dealing with the problem, what do? We figure out ways where we can better live with the problem. I'll give you an example. I only saw it today. I was laughing for 10 minutes. Fellow, he's sitting there in his bed on his phone. And every time he'd fall asleep, raise your hand if you've done that before. Raise your hand. No? Nobody here willing to admit that they dropped the phone on their face ever? Nobody? Okay. Just me. He got sick of his phone falling on his face. I'll send you the video, by the way. So he developed a helmet with sensors that as soon as he would drop his phone on his face, it would go whoop, and it would block the phone from hitting his face. I could think of so many other ways to solve this problem. Yeah, chief amongst ways to solve this problem. Turn on your side and use your phone. Solved. But the guy literally built a motorized helmet operating on sensors to be able to still use his phone above his face in his bed. This is what I mean when I say that instead of solving problems, we figure out ways to ensure that we could keep doing the problem, but without the pain of the problem, instead of solving the issue itself. That's what people do. You're fighting with someone, so you start avoiding them, instead of just solving the problem. You build yourself a helmet. And now they can't hurt you. But the fact that you are apart hurts you. So the first step that we need from Hashem is this part where God teaches us not to be satisfied with being a person who's falling. Not to be satisfied with being sick. Please God. There's a beautiful interpretation in Egypt. The Pasuk says that there are 4 expressions of redemption. Ve'otzeti, ve'itzalti, ve'ga'alti, ve'lakachti. And the rabbis say, ve'hotzeti, and I will take you out. What did God say He would take us out from? Mitachat sivlot Mitzrayim. I will take you out from under the bondage or under the burden of Egyptian servitude. Now here's where it gets interesting. In Hebrew, the word sivlot or sevel or savlanut is not only something that you carry, savlanut also means patience. Says the Khatam Sofer, you know what the redemption of Vehotzeti was? God says, I will take you out from under the patience that you have for Egypt. Sometimes we develop patience with pain. And instead of being impatient enough to be able to solve the problem, God grants us, a person makes for themselves a helmet and stays in the pain. The redemption was God making us impatient. I don't want to wait. I know what I want, and I know when I want it. Right now. Salanut. In Hebrew, I don't know, impatient. No, how do you say not? Choser savlanut. No, it just means no, like no. But there's another word for it. There's got to be.
When you have savlanut.
When you don't have savlanut. Yeah, that's
always with savlanut.
That's just the words cobbled together.
It's always coming with savlanut around.
Right. Yeah. I think there's another word for it, but we'll see if we can find it. Just wait, be patient. We'll find it. Hey. Okay. Let's continue. So a person can be trapped in their own mind. They can be trapped in a situation. They can be trapped by their own acceptance of what they should not be accepting. They can be trapped in the past, childhood traumas, definitions that they have of what a relation should be or shouldn't be or could be or couldn't be.
What's always with savlanut?
I'll take choser savlanut for 400. Okay. So what we do is we ask Hashem to open up our eyes to see. And all of a sudden, like Rosalie, the lights went on, and I don't want to go back in the dark. So we've described Somech Nofelim, Rofe Cholim, Matir Asurim. I want to take the next 7 minutes, because we're at 53 minutes, and the class is usually an hour. I want to take the next 7 minutes to try and cover Umekayem Emunato Lishene Afar. There's a tremendous amount here, but I feel like I want to finish it today. Okay? What does it mean Umekayem Emunato Lishene Afar? And God keeps His faithfulness to those that sleep in the dust. Now, on a simple level, what does it mean that they're sleeping in the dust? It means that Hashem revives the dead, like we said. But what's interesting is at the beginning of this blessing, we said Mechayem etim berachamim rabim, that God revives the dead with great mercy. So what are we saying over here at the end? That God keeps His promise to those that are dead, that He's going to revive them. We already said it before. What is this? And why do we change the way we refer to them? Before they're called metim, people who passed away, and now we're calling them dust sleepers. What is this change of language? So I want to share with you a few different explanations. Explanation number one. Lishene Afar means it's talking about the great tzaddikim. Our tradition tells us that the perfect tzaddikim, when they are buried, because they have elevated their physical being to be completely spiritual, the bodies don't decompose in the earth. Wow. Now that sounds crazy, except for the fact that it is a phenomenon that has been observed numerous times. Bodies that are hundreds of years old, of great tzaddikim, that had to be moved because they were going to plow through a cemetery. And they came down there and they did everything that they could, and they did tevilah because they knew they had to move him out of respect for the dead. And they opened up the grave of great tzaddik, and they were able to see. One of them said it looked like his beard was still wet from going in the mikveh before they buried him. And it's not 1 or 2 or 5 stories, many times. So the first answer is, these are not people who are dead. These are just people who are asleep. Like they're sleeping in the dust, and the minute will come and the switch will be flipped, and then Mashiach comes and they come back to us. The first answer is, this is different than that. So that one is with great mercy, because maybe they deserved it so, maybe they didn't deserve it so much. This is great tzaddikim, they deserve it. Here we're not talking about God's mercy. This is just lishenei afar. He promised them, they fulfilled their end of the bargain. With their deeds, He's going to fulfill His end of the bargain. So Mekayim Emunato means, God, you've kept your promise to the great tzaddikim in terms of protecting their bodies from deterioration and decay. The second interpretation says that we're referring not only to the great tzaddikim, not only to people like this, but rather to people that are humble. Avraham Avinu famously said, Anochi afar va'efer, I am dust and ash. Dust means, in this context, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of those that are sleeping in the dust. What do we say in the end of the Amidah? V'nafshi, and my soul, ke'afar lakotiyeh, should be like dust to everyone. God makes sure to take care of the humble ones. So He supports the weak, i.e. the falling, the sick, the trapped. But the person who's vulnerable, who's humble, who's afar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu also protects that person. Beautiful idea. And this is the might of God. You ever see someone that you think to yourself, this person, how does he even survive? Everyone takes advantage of him. He's the nicest person in the world. He's a doormat. And somehow, things wind up working out for them. That is God looking out for a humble person. These shenei afar, people that are not always fighting. You have some people who are always messing over, trying to, manipulate the situation, and you know what? And it doesn't work out for them. And then the one guy who's not trying to do anything, and Hashem just makes it work out for them. The shenei afar. God keeps, He's loyal to those that are that consider themselves to be people that dwell in the dust. They're not on the top of a mountain. Am Yisrael is compared to the stars in the dust. That's the second interpretation. The third interpretation is something which I found very, very powerful. And that is, not only does it refer to tzaddikim or to people that are in the dust, but on a Kabbalistic level. Rav Chaim Vital writes that human beings are made up of 4 distinct elements: earth, fire, wind, and water. Now, this doesn't mean that there is actual fire in you. It means, on a spiritual level, each one of these things represents an element of the human self. Fire might represent a person's anger or his jealousy or his passion. Water represents a person when they're easygoing, when they're easy to get along with. Whatever shape container they're in is the shape of the water. It just goes quite literally with the flow. It never goes uphill or upstream. It always flows just to the lowest place. Earth is something which just doesn't move. It's inanimate. Fire and water and wind all move. Earth is this thing that just stays where it is. Each of these things represent certain human characteristics. And each one of the 4 represents something positive and something negative. So a person, as an example, who's not running after honor, might be called afar, earth. But a person who's not running after mitzvot, what is that also coming from? Earth. My laziness. My inanimate self. A person might be using fire to pray with fire, with enjoyment, with excitement, to try and build a beautiful organization to help the sick and the needy. Or the person could use that fire for all sorts of illicit desires. Each one of the four represent and pull the person in a certain direction. The healthiest people are people who have figured out how to balance between the four elements. Almost everyone has one dominant element. And when that dominant element is taking you in a good direction, great. But what happens when it's taking you in a difficult direction? What do you need to do? You balance it with the opposite of it. Fascinating, huh? So if you think about fire for a minute. Fire and water, what does water do to fire? Extinguishes it. What does wind do to fire? California. Spreads it everywhere. So sometimes if there's a deficiency in one character trait or one character element, you can use another character element to influence it, either up or down. Think of earth. What happens when you mix earth with water? It becomes mud. What happens if you take that mud and then you expose it to fire? It becomes brick, clay, right? That's what they would do. They would mix the mortar and then fire it into bricks. So each one of these elements can have an impact on the other part of the elements. Say Chazal that when a person sees this element of afar, of physicality in their life, and lishene afar, they take the physical element of themselves and they put it to sleep, they put it to bed. God notices most when a person is doing something in their life that is difficult for them to do. And Hashem says, when I see you struggle against yourself, when you're putting your physicality, your afar to bed, I promise you I will be by your side. Umekayem emunato lishene afar. The last thing I want to share with you is one last line, and that is as follows. If you think, I can't believe it, I'm falling, understand that everyone is falling. Gravity is a reality of our universe. Everything is falling. In physics, that would be called the law of entropy. What's the law of entropy?
Things scattering, disconnect.
Not disconnecting, but deteriorating. That things left to themselves will deteriorate. So every person is in a constant state of falling. So then how are we growing? How are we achieving? The answer is, we're putting effort in. Think of it like this escalator that's going down. If you just sit there and do nothing, you go down to the bottom floor. But if you actually climb up it, you can climb fast enough to... If you run fast enough up the escalator that's going down, you can outrun the process of decline. That is who we are as human beings. You hit a certain age and your body starts to age. You can run faster than that for a very long time. I know 75-year-olds that are in better shape than me. And I'm not saying that to be kind. I have a friend who's 75 years old, maybe almost 80 now, and he still goes heli skiing. He jumps out of helicopters at the top of mountains and skis down the mountains. At the age of 72, when he shattered his leg, they flew him to a hospital, reconstructed his leg. He's back in the mountains now. I can't do that. You can outrun age for a very long time. Eventually it catches up with everybody. You know, I kind of feel like that guy, when they bury him in his grave, in his skis, you're just going to see 2 skis coming out of the grave. At 120. But ladies, understand this. The Yetzer Hara is always pulling at you. Your impatience and your anger is always pulling you down. But you can run. So Hashem says, "Umekayem emunato lishenei afar." I promise you something. The Gemara says, "B'derech she'adam rotzeh lelech," in the way that a person wants to go, molichim oto. That's where they take him. You want to go to good things? Hashem says, I got you. I'll help you. I'm taking you. You want to go to bad things? Hashem says, okay, I got you. I'm taking you. Hashem says to those that are trying to put the afar to sleep, not just I will reward you, but I promised to help you, and I will. Umekayem emunato lishenei afar. You never went to shul. Now you want to start coming. It's hard. Hashem says, you go 5 times. The 6th time, I'll make you want to go. You make yourself get up, set 16 alarms. The 6th time, you'll wake up 1 minute before your alarm goes off. And that is part of this response, if you will, to falling and sickness and being trapped, is where Hashem says, let me lead you. Not just save you from falling or fix you from being ill or get you out of prison, but let me help you rise. Umekayem emunato lishenei afar. Hashem should bless us to see and to ride that wave.